Okay, here we go. Find two consecutive even whole numbers whose product is 224. Find two consecutive even whole numbers whose product is 224. Now I'm telling you right now, you can use the guess and check method and you can figure this out. You can just start punching numbers and going back and forth, and you can figure out what two numbers multiplied together give you 224 that are right next to each other. I would advise you to really focus on how to do this algebraically, because later on this semester you're going to be doing something very similar to this, and it is not going to have a rational solution. That means you will not be able to do the guess and check method. So focus on the algebra of how we do this. Now, if I told you that I had the number 3 and I wanted the next consecutive number, what is the next consecutive number after 3? Don't make it harder than it is. What's the next number after 3? 4. 4. Okay, if I have the number 6, what's the next consecutive number? If I have 8, what's the next consecutive number? 9. If I have x, what is the next consecutive number after x? If I have x, what is the next consecutive number after x? 2. Okay. So if I have 3, what did I do to 3 to get the next number? I added 1. So if I have 4, what did I do to 4 to get the next number? 5. So if I have x, what do I do to x to get the next consecutive number? I add 1. Okay, so I have x. The very next consecutive number would be x plus 1. Okay? That is how you write consecutive numbers algebraically. Okay? So the next consecutive number, if I have x, my next consecutive number would be x plus 1. X plus 1. Now, this particular problem is saying find two consecutive even numbers. So if I've got the number 6, what is the next consecutive even number? 8. Okay, if I've got the number 12, what's the next consecutive even number? 14. If I have the number x, what is the next consecutive even number? X plus 2. Excellent. Okay, so this right here, x and x plus 2, is how you write two consecutive even numbers, x and x plus 2. Now I want us to talk a minute about this number, this word right here, whole numbers. Whole numbers we learned about probably in kindergarten, maybe preschool. Whole numbers start with 0. They don't involve fractions and they don't involve decimals. So we go 0, 1, 2, 3, on to infinity. In this situation, it's important because we are not going to have any negative numbers. So my solution to this, if I get a negative number, I'm going to throw it out because this particular problem is talking about whole numbers only. So it's a little bit of vocabulary that you just want to be aware of. A little bit of vocab. So, what does the word product mean? Multiply. So what I'm doing is I am multiplying x times x plus 2. And when I multiply those two numbers together, what do I get? 224. That's what I get. Okay? So, this right here is my first number. This is the next even whole number. This is the product that I get when I multiply those two together. Now, do we know how to solve this equation? We do. We know how to solve it. Okay? And the way that we solve it is we solve it by multiplying everything out and setting it equal to 0. Do you know how to do that? Yes, you do know how to do this. Okay? So what I want you to do now is I want you to distribute the x. Distribute the x right now. On your paper, distribute the x. What do I do next?
Bring the 2 to the other side.
The 224, the 224 needs to be moved over. And I do that by subtracting it from both sides. So I have x squared plus 2x minus 224, and that equals 0. Okay? We know how to solve this. We know how to solve this. We solve this by factoring. Okay, my product is a negative number. It's negative 224. My sum is positive 2. That means that I am looking for two numbers that are opposite in sign. And the reason for that is because I have a negative product. So I need one positive number and one negative number. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you that 15 squared, 15 times 15, is 225. So since 15 squared is 225, what is a reasonable number to check to see if it will go into 224? What's a reasonable number? What's a number close to 15? 12. Okay, what about another one? What's another number to check? 14. What would be another number to check? 16. Okay, so knowing that, tell me what my numbers are. It's not 12. Okay, I'm looking for two numbers. When you multiply them together, you get 224. It's 14 and 16. Okay, because 14 times 16 is 224. Now, my sum has to be positive. Because my sum's positive, which one of those numbers is negative? So I've got 14 and 16. The 14 is negative. Good. You got it. So those are my two numbers. Negative 14 and 16. Negative 14 times 16 gives me negative 224. Negative 14 plus 16 gives me positive 2. So here I've got x minus 14 and x plus 16. Okay, so now I do x minus 14 equals 0, x plus 16 equals 0. Okay, now, if I told you, if the problem on your quiz or your test or your homework was this problem right here, and the directions said solve, okay? If that's what the problem was, your answer would be 14 and negative 16. That's what your answer would be on a test, on a quiz, on homework. But the problem is this word problem. The problem says find two consecutive even whole numbers whose product is 224. So we have to go back up here and make sure 14 works. Does negative 16 work? Does negative 16 meet these parameters that are given in this problem? No. Okay? Therefore, I have to throw this out. And when you're dealing with word problems, sometimes that happens. Sometimes you've got to throw your negatives out. Now, if x equals 14, so right here, I have that x equals 14. If x is 14, what's x plus 2? I heard it. 16. Okay, so my two numbers, my two consecutive even whole numbers, whose product is 224, there are 16 and 14. Now, I realize that if you had enough time, you could figure that out just by guessing and checking. I would encourage you not to do that because you want to be able to do this algebraically when we're dealing with irrational numbers. That's an important thing to remember. Okay? So the solution to this is this right here. My two numbers are 14 and 16. Okay? Can I move to the next screen? Okay. The perimeter of a rectangle is 32 inches, and the area is 60 square inches. Find the length and the width of the rectangle. Okay? We don't know the length and the width of this rectangle. We do know the perimeter, and we do know the area. What is the first thing I should do here? If I don't know what to do next, what's one thing that I can do? Draw a rectangle. There we go. There's my rectangle. Okay? Now, it talks about perimeter and it talks about area. Okay? I know that the perimeter of a rectangle is 2 times its length plus 2 times its width. I also know that the area of a rectangle is length times width. Now, I can rewrite my perimeter and I can erase this P right here. And what can I put in for that P? What number value? Good, because it tells me the perimeter of a rectangle is 32 inches. Okay, it tells me that. Now I can erase this A, and what can I put in for A? What does it tell me the area of this rectangle is? 60. Okay. Now, students typically do okay until this point. Okay, they're like, okay, I've got my area, I've got my perimeter. Now what do I do? What we have here is what's called a systems of equations. Systems of equations. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take this 60 equals length times width, and I'm going to solve for L. So now I've got the length equals 60 divided by W. That's what I've got. So I just solved for L. So I'm going to take this 60 over W, and I'm going to put it in for this L up here. That's how I'm going to solve that. So I'm going to rewrite this, and I'm going to say 32 inches equals 2 times 60 over W plus 2W. Okay? Now what I have is an equation with only one unknown. I only have one unknown. I don't have an L and a W anymore. I just have a W. Now, I'm going to go ahead and multiply this 2 times the 60 just so I can get rid of it. So I'm going to have 32 equals 120 over W plus 2W. Now, anytime that I have a rational, or anytime I have a fraction, what I do is I multiply everything by its least common denominator. So if I had 1/2 x plus 3 equals 4, what would I multiply everything by in my red equation right there? What would I multiply everything by? 2. Okay, and when I multiplied everything by 2, that would eliminate my fraction. What is in the denominator in this equation? What's in the denominator? I heard it. W. W is what's in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply everything here by W. So I get W times 32. Then I get W over 1 times 120 over W. Then I have W times 2W. And when I rewrite this, I end up with 32W equals 120 plus 2W squared. Okay. We have accomplished the difficult part. Now we know how to solve this. So I am going to rewrite this over here on the side. I have 32W equals 120 plus 2W squared. I need to get this in a format where I can factor it. So I've got to have 0 on this side. My 2W squared is going to come first because that's standard form. Standard form is AX squared plus BX plus C equals 0. Okay, so you want your W squared, you want your W, and then you want your constant. I need to move this 32W over. So what am I doing? When I want to move that 32W over, what am I doing? Subtracting. Okay, so I am subtracting 32W, and then what's the last thing I have? 120. Good. Now we know what to do with this. We know how to solve this. Now, when I tell you to factor, what do I always tell you to look for first? Say that again. Greatest common factor. And this is a prime reason to look for the greatest common factor. If I didn't factor out the greatest common factor here, I would have to do A times C to find my product. I'd have to do 2 times 120. 2 times 120 is 240. And then my sum that I would be looking for is negative 32. So those are large numbers that I am dealing with. But if I factor out a 2, I'm left with W squared minus 16W plus 60. Is that easier to factor? It is significantly easier to factor. Significantly easier to factor. Okay? So now what I want you to do, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do it, you are factoring this problem right here. You're looking at your sum, which is 60. I'm sorry, your sum is negative 16, and your product is 60. So take the next 3 minutes to do that. chapter is about. We were looking for two numbers that multiplied together to get 60, added together to get negative 16. Our product is positive. That means my numbers have to be both be positive or both be negative. They're both negative because my sum is negative. Okay, so I've got negative 6 and negative 10 give me 60. Negative 6 and negative 10 give me negative 16. Now, this next step, we have a 2 out here. Now, I went ahead and wrote 0 equals 2, and then I threw it out. The reason that I want you to get in the habit of writing that is eventually you're going to have a 2x, or you may have an x squared, or you may have some variable on the outside that doesn't have a +6 or a +9 or something with it. And you've got to set that 2x equal to 0. And when you solve that, then you'll end up with x equals 0. Now, we don't have that now, but I don't want you to get in the habit of automatically throwing it out because it's outside the parentheses, or it was your GCF. Because if your GCF has a variable in it, then you have to solve for that variable the same way that you solve for them here. So the reason that we throw this out is it's just 0 equals 2, and that's not correct. And so we mark it out. But if I did have a variable here, then I'd have to set that equal to 0. Okay? W minus 6 equals 0, W minus 10 equals 0. So we get 6 and we get 10. And those are the lengths of my rectangle. Now, in this situation, they were both positive, and so they both work. If one of these was negative, then you would have to throw that out. And sometimes that happens, and it's going to happen on our next problem. Okay? So be aware of that, because you always, at this point, you have to say, does this make sense? Both of these make sense, so they're part of our solution. If one of these was negative, it wouldn't make sense, and so you would have to throw it out. Okay? You ready to talk about Pythagoras? No? That's okay. We're going to talk about him anyway. Pythagoras was known for his work with triangles. Pythagoras was known for his work with triangles. Okay? And he was known for his work because he came up with the Pythagorean theorem. Does anybody know what the Pythagorean theorem is? Good. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Anybody know what this c is called? What the vocab word for that c? Hypotenuse. Okay, so that right there is our hypotenuse. Okay? Hypotenuse. So, what we're looking at right here is a triangle. Suppose that the length of one leg of a right triangle is 3 inches more than the length of the other leg. If the length of the hypotenuse is 15 inches, find the lengths of the other two legs. So C is our hypotenuse, A and B are our legs. They're the legs of our triangle. So now I'm going to draw a new triangle. And I'm going to start here. If the length of the hypotenuse is 15 inches, okay? The hypotenuse is 15 inches. The hypotenuse is my C value, which is opposite. So I'm going to put my 15 right here. My hypotenuse is 15. Okay? Now I'm going to look at the length of one leg is 3 inches more than the length of the other. So if I make this leg X, what is the length of the other leg? X plus 3. Great job. Okay? X plus 3. So now, in order to solve this, I am going to plug in my X plus 3, and my 15 to the a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I'm going to have x squared, because that's the length of one of my legs. Then I'm going to have x plus 3 squared, because that's the length of another one of my legs. And then I'm going to have that equal to 15 squared. Okay? So, I'm going to leave my x squared alone. What do I have to do with x plus 3 squared? What do I have to do with it? I think I heard somebody say FOIL it. So I want you to FOIL x plus 3 times x plus 3 right now. On your paper, you're doing first, outer, inner, last. Okay? So you should have gotten x squared plus 3x plus 3x plus 9. Okay, and my next step, I'm going to combine like terms. I have an x squared and an x squared. What does that give me? 2x squared. 3x plus 3x gives me, okay, and then I have plus 9. What's 15 squared? 225. Good. Okay, what's my next step before I can factor this? What's the last thing I need to do? Make it equal to 0. And I do that by subtracting 225 from both sides. Okay, so I'm subtracting 225 from both sides. So I end up with 2x squared plus 6x minus 216 equals 0. Okay? Now I'm going to rewrite this at the top and then erase. So I have 2x squared plus 6x minus 216 equals 0. Your next step, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do it. Your next step is to factor. What do you want to factor out first? A 2. That's your GCF. Factor that 2 out first. Okay? I'm giving you 3 minutes. Factor this and find solutions for me. My product's 3. My sum is negative 108. What are my two numbers?
Negative 12, negative 9 and positive 12.
Negative 9 and positive 12. Good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what this means. We're going to talk a little bit about what this means. My product was this negative 108. That means we have one positive and one negative number. Okay? In order to get a negative product, we have to have one positive and one negative number. My sum is 3, so the larger of those two numbers is going to be positive. Okay? That's how we got our x minus 9 and our x plus 12. I set the 2 equal to 0, even though I knew I was going to have to throw it out just for habit. Then I've got x minus 9 equals 0, x plus 12 equals 0. That gives me x equals 9 and x equals negative 12. If you were simply solving this equation, if you were given the equation and I said solve, this would be your answer. But that's not what this is. We are talking about a triangle, and we are talking about the lengths of each side of the triangle. And a length cannot be negative. So what do I have to do with this x equals negative 12? Get rid of it. I have to throw it out. It is not going to work. Okay? So my only answer is this x equals 9. But the question says, find the lengths of the two legs. Okay? 9 only gives me the length of one of the legs. So my x is 9. And I think we're talking about inches. So we've got 9 inches. How do I find the length of the other leg? Plus 3. Okay? So the lengths of my leg are 9 inches and 12 inches. That's what's happening here. Okay, can I move to the next one? One more triangle problem. One more triangle problem. The area of a triangular sheet of paper is 28 square inches. One side of the triangle is 2 inches more than 3 times the length of the altitude to that side. Find the length of that side and the altitude to that side. So I'm going to draw a triangle right here. Okay, this is not a right triangle anymore. This kind of goes back to our geometry. I know some of you may wish never to think about geometry again. This is my altitude right here. Okay, it meets a side at a 90-degree angle. So we're talking about this dotted line, and we are talking about this side right here. Okay? The altitude is also the height of the triangle. This length right here is the base of the triangle. So does anyone remember the area of a triangle? What's the area of a triangle? I heard 1/2 base times height. If you need that, I will give it to you on your test. Okay? I will give you the formula if you need it. 1/2 base times height. Okay? Now, let's look again at the information that we're given in this. One side of the triangle is 2 inches more than 3 times the length. how do I write, if I'm going to make this right here x, how do I write 3 times the length? 3x. Then how do I write 2 inches more? Plus 2. Okay? Now I have information that I can plug into my formula. The area is 28 square inches. So I'm going to have 28 equals 1/2. The base that I'm looking at is 3x plus 2. The height that I'm looking at is x. Okay? How do I get rid of that 1/2? What do I do? Multiply by 2. So when I multiply by 2, I get 56 equals 3x plus 2 times x. We know what to do from here. Okay? We know how to do the rest of this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute this x. So I'm going to get 3x squared plus 2x equals 56. What's the next thing I have to do?
Move 56 over.
Move the 56 over. So I'm going to subtract 56 from both sides. Okay, at that point, we have 56 equals 3x squared plus 2x. So I distributed my x. Then I am moving my 56 over. And you know how to factor this. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to factor it. What's my product? Nope. I have to do 3 times negative 56. Negative. Perfect. Okay, what's my sum? Good. Because my sum is negative, you are looking for 1 positive and 1 negative number. Okay? You are looking for 1 positive and 1 negative number. What are the numbers? Good. What's your next step? How do you factor? What process do you use here? Grouping. Good. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about this. Okay? You had a trinomial that you had to factor where your a value is not 1. That means there was a coefficient in front of the x squared. When there is a coefficient in front of the x squared, you have to multiply the a value, which is 3, times the c value, which is negative 56. That's how we got our product of negative 168. Because our product was negative, I'm looking for one positive number and one negative number. The two numbers were 14 and 12. The 14 was positive because my sum is positive. So, different than how we did it when we had just x squared, where we just did x minus 14 and x plus 12, or vice versa, we have to split this b term. And that's what I did right there. I split the b term. So I took 2x and I did 14x minus 12x. This statement right here is an equivalent statement to this. I just split it. I'm working backwards. Okay? At this point, I factored by grouping. I ended up with x minus 4 and 3x plus 14. When I solve this, I get x equals positive 4 and x equals negative 14 over 3. We are talking about the distance of a side of a triangle. So what can you tell me about this right here? Can't use it. Throw it out. Okay? So, my only answer is that x equals 4. Okay? So this leg of this triangle right here is 4 inches. I need to know the length of that other one. How do I find out the length of the other one? Plug it in. So I have 3 times 4 plus 2, which is 14. Okay? So, reread the word problems over and over again. Draw pictures. Look for formulas. Those things are important as you go through this. Your test is on Monday. I have one more type of word problem that I'm going to do on Friday. I'm actually also going to do a video on it and send it out just so you'll have it ahead of time. So look for an email that says this is the other word problem video. But we'll also do one on Friday. Study. If you don't know how to factor, you will fail this test and you'll fail the next test. You've got to know how to factor to be successful in this class. Okay? Come to study sessions. Look at what you need to look at.